Welcome to the September 24th Instructional Improvement Day. Today, we will be engaging in a deep data dive into the pre-assessments that you administered over the first 2 weeks of school. Before we jump into the pool, I wanted to take a few moments to thank everyone for your hard work, perseverance, and understanding that it took to get these important baseline results. As many of you are aware, there were some issues with the syncing of schedules with our online testing platforms. This caused many of you to have to write into our testing email to have students added to the test sessions. Couple that issue with the large amount of scheduling changes that continue to take place, we have had to make many changes to the student test sessions. There has been a very dedicated team of professionals that have put their work and home lives on hold so that you may have a positive testing experience. I hope you found our responses to be timely and helpful. We will continue to work with our technology services and our online testing vendors to better our testing experience for everyone. With that being said, let's jump into the work for today, data-driven instruction.
Julie Klein knows the obstacles she faces. As a kindergarten teacher in an elementary school, she works every day in an economically depressed and deprived community. Most of Julie's students qualify for free or reduced lunch. On the first day of school, only 1 of 25 kindergarten students in her class can read, and most only know a few letters of the alphabet. Most teachers in a place that presents so many challenges would run, but not Julie. She sees opportunity and promise in the faces of each of the children who are beginning their educational journey. Julie will work fiercely and tirelessly to ensure her students do not lag behind. In fact, she will work to not only catch them up, but have them surpass their peers in local suburban schools. Julie will guide her students' learning, so national test results show her students scoring well above the mean. Perhaps even more important is each day Julie and her students will partake in creative, joyful, and focused instruction, building a genuine and enduring love of learning. Julie is not a miracle worker. She is talented, driven, and a hard-working teacher who has put in place systems and organizations around her teaching environment. These systems begin and end with the use of data through a reflective process. Julie and her colleagues deliberately spend time reviewing test results and identifying performance on standards to help shape the instruction over the next several units of study. The results are simple: student success. Julie is like so many of you, driven for and by student success. The primary learning targets for today are for us to take a deeper look than ever before at the pre-assessment data. In the past, we have often looked at overall performance of our class and then moved on to our curriculum. Today, we will tear apart our pre-assessments and look very closely at the results of our students. Together, we're also going to learn to identify common patterns of strengths, weaknesses, and errors. Then we'll take our analysis deeper by identifying the root cause of the patterns using a test-in-hand approach. Next, we will work together to design specific strategies that can be used during core instruction to respond and remedy that root cause. Finally, we will be able to share very detailed and specific information with colleagues about the performance of students and the action steps that we have designed to provide students with exceptional learning and instruction. The learning targets today will be achieved by reviewing the recent MAP and DAP pre-assessment data. However, the learning today is not exclusive to these MAP and DAP results. The process we'll be going through also applies to the pre- and post-assessments you use in your PLC 5-step process. No doubt this work is significant to all of us. Let's take a look at where it fits in our overall district vision.
The Akron Public Schools is committed to prepare each child for success by preparing students to become lifelong learners who are dependable, caring, responsible innovators, and critical thinking, problem-solving leaders of the world. We are also committed to becoming the #1 urban school district in the United States. There are many areas of focus needed to make this goal a reality. Today, our session will hone in on what the district visual represents as Focus Area 1, Teaching and Learning, Core Academics in the Classroom. This area commits to our focused work around professional learning communities, our response to intervention or pyramid framework, and the Ohio Teacher and Principal Evaluation System. Today will be divided into 3 different parts, with each part building on the previous. In Part 1, Planning the Road Trip, we will be carefully analyzing the root cause of patterns in the pre-assessment MAP and DAP data. We will be using a test-in-hand format where you will literally be looking at specific test questions within the tests or specific skills that were measured on the test. This test-in-hand approach will help you to determine patterns that will impact your instructional plans. In Part 2, Creating the Itinerary, it is designed to provide you with resources and time to effectively plan the action steps that you will be taking in response to the pre-assessment results. What instructional strategies will you employ based on these pre-assessment results? And how will you monitor the performance of your students? When we talk about action planning, think step 3 of the 5-step PLC process. Finally, in Part 3, we will be engaging in data conversations based on the deep analysis and action plan development you have done. You'll be working with a team to engage in this conversation. During this time, we will be providing feedback to one another and challenging each other to think outside the box and outside our comfort zones.
You should have in front of you a participant workbook. This workbook will guide us through the activities today. You should also have access to your pre-DAP and MAP test results, either a hard copy or electronically. For DAPs, you will need the assessment summary, standards analysis, if available, and the item analysis reports. If a standard analysis report is not available, we have provided you a standard blueprint so you will know which standards are being assessed on each question. Additionally, you will need a copy of the specific test. MAP users, you will need the class summary report, class breakdown reports, and be able to access the Descartes Continuum of Learning reports for your class. You will also need a copy of your grade level standards. At this time, please make sure you have the materials you will need for today. The theme for today is data-driven instruction. Data-driven instruction can have a variety of meanings and implications. As we begin to embark on the activities for today, please open your participant workbook and answer the first reflection question. What do you think when you hear the phrase data-driven instruction? Spend a few moments reflecting on the meaning of this phrase to you, then share your thoughts with a partner.
When I first started studying data-driven instruction, I heard something that really stuck with me. Paul Bambrick-Santoya, a leader in this work, said, "Instruction must begin with assessment. It is the roadmap to the student's final destination." From the moment I heard this, it stuck with me. It is the roadmap to the student's final destination, their destination of life. With that in mind, let's begin by planning a road trip. Imagine you have been asked to plan a once-in-a-lifetime road trip for a group of family and friends that are near and dear to you. Your family and friends have come to you because they know you would never let them down and will plan the most memorable trip ever. They have every confidence in you. Feeling a bit nervous, you gather some information. Who will be going on the trip? Where will the travelers be starting? And when will they be going on this once-in-a-lifetime trip? Much like the road trip that we're planning, we need to gain some important information about where our students are starting on their trip and what their individual needs are.
We will begin by looking at an example of the student summary report from a geometry pre-DAP test. At first glance, we can discover the number of points each student earned on the test and the number of possible points the test was worth. The percent column indicates the percent of questions this student answered correctly. The color coding on this report makes it easy for us to identify the level of proficiency each student had overall on the test. Overall, this paints a very broad picture of the performance of the students on this particular test. It is like telling the trip planner that all the students will be riding and driving in vehicles versus some flying in a plane and others riding in a car. Similar to the DAP reports in Performance Plus, the MAP Class Summary Report provides users with an overall picture of a classroom. On this report, you can identify the overall mean RIT score and how that compares to others at the national level. Additionally, the chart at the bottom can assist in identifying the number of students who scored in various ranges in the different goal areas. For instance, on this report, I know that the class is scoring a 201.7, which is lower than expected for the grade level. I also know that overall 2 students scored below the 21st percentile and 9 scored between the 21st and the 99th percentile. Again, this report helps paint the big picture of the students in your class. You can also use the class breakdown by RIT and goal to assist in painting this big picture.
Now it is your turn. Locate your reports and answer the questions in your...
To get the specs on your testing vehicle, we will need to take a look at the standards that are being assessed. Let's take a look at another DAP report. This time we're going to look at the standards report. The standards report is a very comprehensive report. For today, we're only going to look at a portion of it. Primarily, we're going to hone in on the standard, then the items that are linked to that standard, and overall percentage of student success within each of those standards. Here is a picture of the standards analysis report for geometry. On this report, we can see the first standard, experiment with transformations in the plane, was assessed by questions 1 and 2. Overall, 44.4% of the students in this class answered the question number 1 correctly, while 55.6% answered question 2 correctly. Both questions were tested the same standard. Remember, these are pre-test results, so we do not expect to see the majority of students scoring at the 80 and 90%. So what do we do with this information? Here we need to look at all the standards that are on the assessment and determine the strengths and weaknesses within those standards. Where do we need the most work? Is there a particular standard that stands out from the others? Which standards are the strongest and the weakest for the class?
Now it's your turn to take a look at your standards. Many of you should have access to the standards analysis report for your DAP tests. If you do not, we have provided you with a blueprint of those standards. The next set of activities will have you carefully looking at the performance of your students across these standards. Make sure you use the guiding questions located in your participant workbook. For MAP users, there's not a standard analysis report, but you do have the tools that you need to complete this analysis. You will need a copy of your ELA, Math, and Science grade level standards. You'll be working through a series of questions to evaluate the hierarchy of those standards that you'll be using to plan your instruction and hypothesizing on the needs of your current students. So, if you're ready, let's lift the hood on each vehicle and see what's inside. You now know the type of vehicles, how fast they can go, how much gas they hold, and how quickly they're going to burn that gas. But what about the passengers? These people that are near and dear to your heart and want a trip of a lifetime also have various needs. As the planner, you need to determine if there are certain dietary needs for each passenger, who's the fast driver, who's slow and steady, who needs to take frequent restroom breaks, and who sleeps for the entire trip. Each of the needs of each person needs to be carefully considered to ensure that all passengers get to the final destination at the same time and experience this amazing trip. The passengers in our trip are much like looking at an item and skills analysis report. It's the specifics about the people that make up the critical components of the trip.
Item analysis begins with a simple squint test. Take a look at the sample here. The first thing I want you to do when you receive an item analysis report is to simply take a step back and squint. You heard me. Take a look at this report and squint those eyes. What do you notice? On this example, I notice there are several questions the majority of the students got incorrect, but patterns of correct responses also begin to emerge. This simple squint test can assist in the initial look at patterns and trends. In fact, I may begin at this point to hypothesize, why did all the students select similar wrong answers, and how am I going to use this information to help plan my instruction?
Remember the standards that we looked at earlier? If you recall, we looked at 2 questions that measured a particular math standard. Students did significantly better on one question than the other. So what does this mean? Well, it's going to take more than looking at a data report to determine this. We're going to need to look at the actual test and specific test questions. We need the actual test and questions in our hands.
As we look at these 2 questions, we need to ask ourselves, what do students need to be able to do to answer the questions accurately? What skills do they need to possess to complete the task? And what makes one question different from the other? Carefully analyzing these 2 questions, some may draw the conclusion that students are not necessarily struggling with answering rate questions. Rather, they are having a difficult time multiplying mixed numbers. To test our hypothesis, we can look at other test questions that assess the skill of multiplying mixed numbers to see if the students had difficulty on other test questions. If we were to do a further analysis of this, we would find that indeed the skill of multiplying mixed numbers were embedded in many of the questions on the test, and in each instance, students demonstrated difficulty.
Our first level of analysis included us taking a global impression and determining generally academically stronger students than weaker peers. Sorting and the horizontal view allow us to look at questions on which generally stronger academic students outperform their weaker peers. Such questions are relevant because they reveal areas where small group focus or pull-out groups would be highly effective for targeted instruction. By looking at the data horizontally, you can determine if there are students that stand out for either knowing all the content or showing interesting patterns in their responses.
Look at this individual student in the example. What do you think happened to her? Some people may think she fell asleep, that she got distracted, or is a slow test taker. The key point here is that she's not the lowest performing student in the class. There is something else going on with this student that we'll need to address. But if we design an academic intervention to address the skills that she missed on this test, we will not be getting to the real root cause of her test-taking behavior.
The key to deep data analysis is to look at your results in a variety of ways and to determine the specific root causes of errors that were made on the assessment. This process can be done not only with DAPS, but with the formative assessments you are using in your PLC 5-step process, such as your Envision benchmark tests, benchmark literacy unit test, digits tests, and all the other assessments that are used to plan and deliver high-quality instruction. So what if your pre-assessment was MAP? Obviously, you're not going to be able to have the specific test questions in your hands, but you do have the powerful tools within your reach. The Descartes Continuum of Learning can be used in conjunction with your curriculum standards and learning goals. This can be a powerful combination. Earlier, you looked at your standards and ranked them according to instructional intent. Welcome back. Deep analysis work is hard work, but it can be so rewarding when you're really able to determine why students have not been successful on one set of learning goals or on one type of question over another. The assessment results that you just analyzed are results that can also serve for the baseline of the SLOs that many of you are developing. At this time, please take out your SLO template and locate the trend and baseline section of the SLO template and complete the range of performance and trend data sections. You may also include any other information on the performance of your students in this area. Once you have provided this information, you should be complete with the work you have to do on the SLO templates. Please check to make sure you've previously completed all the other sections in the template. And once they're completed, you may turn it into your principal, who will forward it to the SLO review team. Assessments, analysis, and culture are great and necessary things, but unless they are coupled with real, concrete action, they will not bear fruit. Much like a thorough analysis of the vehicles and passengers are essential to planning this once-in-a-lifetime trip. But unless we take that information and plan our routes, our stops, and plan for the detours, the trip will only amount to a dream in your friends and family's mind. The purpose of creating specific action steps around this pre-assessment data is to help educators prioritize instruction around the results relative to the national norm. The action steps should be infused into the core instruction throughout the course of the entire 9 or 18-week period of time. By looking at the type of clothing that will be packed by each person in their suitcase, or the specific questions and skills on each test, we can begin to focus on these concrete strategies needed to move from theory to reality in the classroom. In the next series of activities, you will be considering the data that you just analyzed and determine very specific strategies that you will use to address the skills that your students have demonstrated weaknesses in. You will be looking at the type of instruction that will need to be given as a whole group versus that will need to be provided in an individual or small group setting. You will also identify ways that you will conduct in-the-moment checks for understanding to ensure progress with the specific skills. Finally, you will determine how you will engage the students to know and understand the end goal and what actions they need to take to improve their learning. At this time, please turn to Part 2 of your participant workbook and complete the activities. Today, you have spent a great deal of time looking deeply at students' performance on standards, items, and the skill level at your pre-assessment data. You have also taken the new knowledge on your students' performance and intentionally designed very specific actions and strategies that you have committed to infuse within your core curriculum. It is now time for you to prepare to share that knowledge and your plans with your colleagues. For the next several minutes, each person will individually reflect and write down responses to the data conversation guiding questions located in Part 3 of your participant workbook. The guiding questions may seem very familiar to you. They are the same or very similar to the questions that we practiced using in August. Also, these questions have appeared throughout your participant workbook today with a box around them. This should make it easy for you to go back to your workbook and find the responses that you jotted down earlier today. After you have spent time preparing for the data conversation, individuals will be getting into groups of 3 and following a protocol located in your participant workbook. In the protocol, one person will play the role of the teacher explaining his or her results. One will play the role of a peer providing feedback, and the third person will be an observer. During each data conversation, the observer will take notes on the conversation using the protocol sheet and provide feedback to the other members in the group. Please be sure to read the protocol in its entirety before beginning this activity. So, if you're ready, it is your turn to prepare and then engage in the briefing of the travelers. Ready, set, go.
The trip planning is complete. You have the map in hand, know the specs on all the vehicles and the needs of all your travelers. You've created the plan to get everyone to their dream location successfully and on time. Just like our friend Julie, the kindergarten teacher, we are determined to provide instruction that will lead to students being innovative, knowledgeable, and creative. We are determined to provide the best possible learning environment and strategies that will lead to an engaged environment of successful learners. With the end goal in mind, it is now time to leave on this once-in-a-lifetime trip. Have a great adventure.